Hello.
Oh, I'm looking for the spectacular, the wonderful Scott Taylor.
Let me see if he's here.
Yeah, attaboy.
Okay,
you're just getting the average 9:30 in the morning, Scott Taylor.
No, you have to be excited that I just pumped everything up at Stampede Week. I just played one of my favorite songs of all time called "Wherever the Chucks Will Go" because, as you probably remember, I was literally. I can't believe I wasn't on the board of the World Professional Chalkmaking Association. I loved it. I knew nothing about it before I left. Typical Torontonian, wearing black, smirking and everything, being smug and a loser.
Which is weird for a Toronto person.
Yes, it's completely
it never happens.
Character. And within 8 seconds, I was like, I gotta go to this. I gotta this, that, and the half mile of hell, the whole thing. I love Stampede. Love it.
Do you like that one, Taylor?
Do you ever...
I think it sounds so Mike Richards, doesn't it?
Very much so.
It's just so Mike Richards.
Yeah. Well, tell me more about this Mike Richards you speak of.
Sign me up.
Exactly that guy that you just described. Who now loves Stampede. Loves it.
Did you over the years, you certainly must have gone. You must have done something bad.
What?
You must have done something bad. Come on. You've been to Stampede. You've had no pants on. You've done something.
I've never been to Stampede.
What?
Honestly, I've never been to Stampede, ever.
Are you not allowed? Does your wife say, that's it, Scott? I saw you.
No, I'm not a cowboy.
Oh, trust me. There ain't a lot of there's not a lot of cowboys there either. Really.
True.
What do they say? All hat?
No, I've never been.
Oh, it is the best. And we also...
I have to admit, I think I've only been through Calgary once in the summer. Every other time I've been to Calgary, it's for hockey.
Never been for a football game?
Oh, well, yeah, but it was November. I went to a Grey Cup. The Bombers lost. That was about 93, 92. Yeah, I never went to the summer games. I haven't been to Calgary in the summer, I think, other than we drove through it once to go to Vancouver. But in the winter, I've been like a million times. I feel like I know Calgary in the back of my hand in the wintertime.
Now, do you think when you compare Winnipeg to Calgary, because Dave's obviously from Winnipeg but lived in Calgary, when you compare the two cities, are they similar? Do you think the makeup of those two towns?
No, because Calgary has like a freeway.
Yeah.
Right.
Like you can drive fast in Calgary and get through it. Winnipeg is just, they've got the perimeter highway and you got to go so many miles out of your way. But if you want to go through the town, you can't go through the town because it takes forever.
Yeah, it's a
and I think the people are close because we're Westerners. But
there was a sign.
Winnipeggers are a lot less American than Calgarians.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I also there was as I sent a picture back to Dave in trying to get going through by the south of Winnipeg. There was a sign in French that had so many consonants and whatever. I almost choked reading it. It was a French name, but it had
Ladamogier.
I
was like, hey, I wonder where. That was a lot of letters.
Lagimodier is what the most of the locals call it.
There you go.
Hey, David Bastel just dropped a bomb moments ago. I can't believe it. He said, because we got into the John Tavares thing, so we had a guy from New York who was going to be willing from Boss Bagels to give up free bagels for forever. For John Tavares' lifetime, free fresh bagels delivered to his house every day. Apparently, he lost out to the Maple Leafs, but I'm just saying this was his attempt. Then we saw another guy who burned the jersey. The guy who was so upset, he goes, "Thanks a lot because of the way that you did it. We couldn't even trade. We couldn't get anything for you," and set the jersey on fire. Now, as looking at it from all the great players you've seen who've left teams, do you blame the guy, or is this cross a line for you?
Well, I don't think it crosses the line. I mean, goodness gracious. If you're going to burn your $300 jersey because a guy left the team, because it's not of any value to you anymore, go right ahead and knock yourself out. But it's professional sports. People come and go all the time. Tavares was there a long time and didn't win. I mean, he's never proven to anybody that he's a winner. There's a classic story of an argument between Mike Smith and Phil Housley. And finally, Mike Smith lost his temper and looked Housley right in the eye and said, "Listen, Phil, I can finish last with you or without you." And basically, that's got to be the conversation in New York. We, the Islanders, can finish last with you or without you, John.
Yep.
I mean, at some point in time, you've all got to get together and say, look, it hasn't gone anywhere with the way it is. So guys, move on. It's time to move on. Everybody has a shelf life. And John Tavares never brought the Stanley Cup to the island. Maybe he will in Toronto. Toronto's already a pretty good team. But fans have got to get a grip, you know?
Bingo. And you know what, Scott? In that video, he was, mouthing off after, a few too many Coors Lights, saying how all the good players stick with their team through their entire career. And I'm looking back at the last 10, 15 years thinking, how many players have been drafted by the team that they retire on? It's less than 5. It's less than 5.
Right.
So,
right. What fans would wish, and all fans wish this, is that when a player turns 33, his contract has run out, but his general manager is so brilliant that at the trade deadline, he was able to move him for 3 first-round draft picks and 6 potential all-stars. I mean, that's basically what they think.
Yep.
I mean that's what fans want the GM to do. And we all know that once you get to that point in the guy's career, nobody's going to take him, not even as a rental player. And you may very well be in a playoff hunt yourself, so you need to keep your guy. So it never works out that way. Sometimes you're lucky, and you can move a Stastny as a rental player at the end of a season and at near the end of his career to a team that thinks they have a chance, like happened this year. But for the most part, guys come and go. And more often than not, they play out their contracts and go free agent, and it happens all the time. And as the Jets found out, it happened with Stastny. And now everybody's complaining, oh, he didn't want to be in Winnipeg and all this stuff. Well, you got an opportunity to go to Vegas for more money than you deserve, and you got a 3-year deal at 33. Huh?
Yeah, bingo.
You have to take that. The Jets were only willing to give him 2 years. I mean, that kind of stuff, that's the game. But everybody thinks that their GM is the smartest guy in the world or the dumbest guy in the world. And the reality is, history tells you that it's pretty much always the same. Guys get into their 30s, and they try to hang on, and then some guys like Stastny get lucky and get a 3-year deal.
Yeah,
but for the most part, you don't want to overpay for a guy who, when he's done, is going to be 35 or 36.
They'd be
especially when you have young players to sign.
Exactly, and a ton of them. See, my thing that Mike was referring to was, we went over the Tavares video and so forth, and we'll move on right away. But I said I would be shocked, absolutely shocked, if Austin Matthews retired as a Maple Leaf, because I do not see Austin Matthews retiring in 10 or 15 years as a Toronto Maple Leaf. Agree or disagree? If we're playing the percentages.
Playing percentages, I completely agree.
Bingo.
He will not be a Toronto Maple Leaf when he retires from hockey, because the Toronto Maple Leafs will see in his 30s that he's not in their plans. He may be in the plans of a team, for instance, this year, a Washington Capitals team that's going on to a Stanley Cup. They need one more guy to fill the hole, so they'll pick him up at the trade deadline at 33 or 34, and then he might get one more contract like Stastny did. But I agree with you completely. He will not retire as a Toronto Maple Leaf.
We're in conversation with Scott Taylor here on rawmike.richards.com, both on the website and the dedicated YouTube channel. And sort of looking at so far what we've seen with the tap dancing in the off season, does the West look a whole bunch different to you? Now, again, the almost ridiculous dreamlike scenario that happened in Las Vegas, we're assuming it doesn't happen again. So what does the West look like?
Well, I think Calgary's better. I think Calgary made some moves to become a better hockey team. Edmonton, you can't imagine they'll be as bad as they've been.
They just can't be. They just can't be.
The Jets.
They just can't be as bad. To me, no.
They can't be. They've got too much talent there to be as bad as they were. And injuries play a big role in that, and I don't. You can never discount injuries, but you don't always get pounded the way you do one year to the next. So I think Edmonton will be a better team. I think Colorado's going to be a better team. I think they made a nice move getting that. Matt Calvert is a really solid third liner. I think Colorado's going to be a better hockey club. Dallas, I don't know. Nashville, they'll still be good because they have a goaltender. And you got a goaltender and a real good defenseman, you're going to be good. I think the Jets will be rock solid again. Will they be as good as they were this year? I think that remains to be seen. But as long as Cheveldayoff gets the players signed that he needs to, like Trouba and whatnot, then I think they'll be all right. Minnesota can't be worse, and Bruce Boudreau's doing a decent job. I think the Wild will be in there. Chicago's not very good. St. Louis will be all right. They always are. I think the West is going to look pretty much the same as it did, with the big question mark being Vegas. Can they repeat that? Maybe with Gerard Gallant as head coach, they can. They lost Neal, they lost Perrin. Those are good players, although Perrin didn't play a whole lot at the end. They got Stasny, certainly a replacement for Perrin. Yeah, I think Vegas will be a tough club once again because they're beautifully coached. So you look up and down the whole thing. I don't think you're going to see a lot of changes. Maybe Nashville goes down a little bit and Calgary goes up a little bit, but for the most part, it is what it is. San Jose should be better. If Evander Kane decides that he wants to be a hockey player and not a social media star, he'll help San Jose become a better hockey team.
Bingo. Hey, who's playing third line for the Jets this year, Scott? Because I got to get some Jet talk in here.
Third line?
Yeah, because is that Jack Roslovic's spot to lose?
I think Jack Roslovic, now that Stasny's gone, is going to get every opportunity to play on the first or second line. Roslovic is a really good player, and he's one of those classic players for an old story. John Ferguson used to bring up players from the minors, and they would score a lot of goals in Moncton or Sherbrooke or wherever they were, and he'd bring them up, and he'd either sit them in the press box or he'd play them on the fourth line. And it doesn't do you any good. Jack Roslovic is one of those players who can score goals and make plays, and Roslovic has to play with good players. I mean, he's a really talented guy, but he's got to play with guys who can play hockey. So I just really think that he's the kind of guy that needs to be a first or second line player. So I don't see him as a third liner. Lowry's probably going to be the third line guy. Kopp likely.
Fourth, yeah.
Brandon Tanev's going to get every opportunity to play. Perreault is going to be the center on that line likely. If I was betting right now, I'd probably say Lowry, Perreault.
Scheifele one, and then Brian Little.
Scheifele, Ehlers, and Line are going to be the first line operation, and Wheeler. Well, Wheeler's going to play. I don't know. I think the Jets will go pretty much the way they were this year for the first two lines, and they're not going to lose Perreault. Roslovic's going to get a chance to play probably with Wheeler. Scheifele and Wheeler play really well together, but somebody's got to play with Ehlers that gives him a chance to score more, and I think that they might take a look at Scheifele there. But your third line's going to have Perreault at center. I don't think there's any question. He played real good in the playoffs and looked pretty good. And Adam Lowry is going to be a winger who can take face-offs if he has to. He's really good at face-offs.
Yeah.
And Brandon Tanev's going to get more of an opportunity to play. And there are young players. This Vesalainen's going to get a chance. Whether he makes the team or not is another question, but he's going to get an opportunity to play. I think the third line's pretty solid with Perreault at center. I don't think that's going to change very much, but the key, I think, to the whole thing is Roslovic has got to play with really good players, and that's going to make a huge. He's going to fill the hole that Stasny left if he turns out to be as good a player as we think he can be.
Scotty, looking at the CFL, I made a prediction at the beginning of the year that it would be a lot more competitive than it has been in some years. Still, obviously, some power in the West, but I thought the East would certainly put up a fight. Well, there's been a lot of potholes that we've sort of run over a little bit in the start of this year, and I'm taking a look, and even a team like Montreal that I knew would be battling both on the field to put something on there and maybe off the field What's happened in Toronto, even though they beat Edmonton? I think Edmonton's in a lot of trouble. But looking at the fan base, looking at what I saw in the stands, it's a little disturbing. Like, if you're a CFL fan, yeah, sure, you have a team you cheer for, you maybe season tickets. But CFL fans also take a look, because we only have the 9 teams. And when a building looks like that, should we be concerned?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, who really wants to own the Toronto Argonauts? I guess they have an ownership group and they're fine. But, man, you put 12,000 and change announced, and that's the key to me. That's the announced number, 12,000 and change. 12,760 or something like that. Boy, you put those numbers in the Canadian Football League, and how do you pay the bills, especially in Toronto, where you do have to pay your guys a little bit more money. You got to be nearer the cap than other teams, because the cost of living in Toronto is so great. Compared to Winnipeg or Regina, it really changed the whole way you set your club up. Toronto's got a lot of problems, and Ricky Ray, the injury is one thing. The fact was that he was aging anyway, and won his Grey Cup last year, and everybody cheered. But they were a 9-9 team that got hot in the playoffs.
Yeah,
give them all the credit in the world. They got hot in the playoffs, as Ottawa did the year before when they were 8-9 and 1-1, which proves in the CFL. I don't know why you worry about anything in July and August, because if you're 500 at the end, you just might win a Grey Cup. But I think Toronto, there has to be a lot of worry throughout the league. They've got to do more with what that team does, and I don't know if you can. I get the sense in Toronto every time that I'm there that people in Toronto want a National Football League team or nothing, because they're in Major League Baseball, they're in the NBA, and they're in the NHL. Toronto is not what you would call a minor league town.
I agree.
And they look at the CFL as minor league.
I also think that it's not a great football town, because they can blather on all they want about supporting the NFL, and having the Bills come up here and play, that wasn't enough for them, because those weren't sold out either. So
but those weren't. That's not their team.
No.
And when the NBA comes to Winnipeg, and people love the NBA here, you still get people straggling to buy tickets, and they might get to 14-5 or maybe on the edge of 15, but it's somebody else's team.
It's still a lousy. The problem is, Scotty, this is a lousy football market. Like, it's just not culturally, it's just not tied to them. There was a time.
Well, that may be true. Yes.
Yeah. There was a time where high school football, you could find minor football, just like there are in the rest of the prairies, and obviously hugely in Quebec, where they play a lot of really good football at all the different levels, including the grassroots. We know what it's like out west, but here it's just one of those things that has basically faded away. Which is why, if I'm looking at, you start talking about big league teams, where of course always going to be a Leaf town, but then you look at Major League Baseball and the NBA, Major League Soccer. So TFC is easily well ahead of the Argos, and guess what?
Easily.
More kids play soccer than they do tackle football here in this province.
Well, what about basketball? If there's two growth industries in Toronto, it's basketball and soccer. I mean, because first of all, the players that are coming out of Toronto are boffo. There's some tremendous players coming out of that region. I mean, Andrew Wiggins, Bear, they all speak for themselves. I mean, coming out of Central Ontario, the Toronto market, I mean, basketball is the game of the future there. And if the Raptors can continue to play well and win, I just think basketball is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. If there's a downer, it's the Argos, but I think the CFL has something to do with that. I really believe that if Toronto got a National Football League franchise, you couldn't get a ticket.
Well, I think
on top of that, Mike, a place to play.
Yeah. Well,
because it's not going to work at the Rogers Centre.
No.
You got to have a football stadium, $1 billion football stadium, just like Dallas. And if you do that, Toronto will be just fine in the National Football League. But you got to have your own team. You can't expect people to root for the Buffalo Bills.
Well, I just think that they showed up like they always do in the beginning, and they bragged about how they're going to an NFL game in Toronto and how they told everybody that the NFL was the greatest thing. But after a while, when it's not your team,
exactly.
Because this is the thing. If you put a bowl game, let's say not a top tier bowl game, but the Chick-fil-A bowl or whatever you want to put in there, a .com bowl. But if you played that game, if the weather permitted, if you played that game in Regina, in Mosaic, it would sell out. Why? Because they love football, and they wouldn't even have to be. They wouldn't have to have an allegiance to either of those schools. They would go. Because it's a football province.
Yeah, I believe that.
Yeah.
Saskatchewan really, truly is. And they run great minor programs, and everybody plays, and it's a big deal. You're right. I mean, it's a province where major radio does the Saskatoon Huskies games. University of Saskatchewan.
Right.
I mean, major radio in Saskatoon does the Hilltops, the junior team. And that doesn't happen anywhere else in even Western Canada.
Yeah,
Saskatchewan's football country, and yes, it would work there. I just think if Toronto had its own team, they'd be okay. But I think the Argos are dead, and I don't know what they're going to do with it.
Yeah, that is the truth. That is.
What are they going to do?
I don't know.
Winnipeg back to the east and have a CFL without Toronto? Wow, I don't get that one.
No, and it wouldn't, and that would be the death of it.
Bingo. Hey, Scott, final question from me. We're moving into week 5 in the CFL. Give me your power rankings in the West Division, because there's a couple teams that are starting to fumble, a couple teams in the middle, and maybe one team on top. What's your 1 through 5 right now in the West? Doesn't necessarily have to be by standings, but what you've seen so far through 4 weeks of the season.
Well, Calgary's number 1 because of their defense. I mean, being 3-0 is one thing, but they've only given up, 30, 35 points, something like that? They haven't given up any points, and defense ultimately wins. So Calgary's number 1. Winnipeg's number 2. They've had 2 huge wins. They blew out BC and they blew out Montreal. They lost to Hamilton and lost at home to Edmonton. I think they're playing well enough now with Matt Nichols back that they're number 2. But I think the number 150 points scored, they've scored more points than anybody in the CFL, isn't quite the same when 2 of the wins are 1 at home against BC and 1 against poor Montreal, which is just dreadfully horrible.
Yep.
Edmonton would be number 3, Saskatchewan 4, and BC is an awful football team. They have trouble scoring, and they can't stop anybody from scoring. They're just really, really horrible. And when you look at that game on Saturday night in Winnipeg, and the 2 stars for Winnipeg were Adam Bighill and Andrew Harris, and BC had both of them.
Yeah, exactly.
Boy, BC's looking bad.
Yeah, well, and I don't think after what I saw from Edmonton, they're doing a lot of bragging. But again, they live in Edmonton. If you live in Edmonton,
Edmonton's only a little bit better than Saskatchewan because Chris Jones still has a mess in Saskatchewan. And I don't get Hamilton. I don't get. Mazzoli's put up 4 games of 300 yards, and 2 of the games he couldn't get the ball in the end zone.
Yeah, David and I were talking about that Hamilton performance. I don't get it. That was really bad. I thought at some point, I mean, is this where Johnny Football gets in? I don't know, because it was getting close to that time.
I think he has to play at some point unless Mazzoli comes back with another 300-yard game and puts up 40. But they're not scoring any points. Now, is that Mazzoli's fault or is that the offense's fault? That may be the people who run the offense.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
But boy, you put up those kinds of numbers and score 13 points against the Saskatchewan Roughriders team that is obviously not very good. I mean, they only put up 18 in their own building.
Right.
Remember in the CFL when we used to go to games in Calgary, in Winnipeg, when you had to score 30 to win?
Yes.
You had to score 30 to have a chance to win.
Yeah.
And today, if you can score 25, you can win by 2 touchdowns.
Yep. No, it's true.
That's another problem with the CFL.
It's true. Scotty, we got to run. Thanks so much for joining us here.
Hey guys,
we appreciate it. We'll talk to you again real soon.
Always fun. Talk soon. Bye.
That is Scott Taylor joining us here from now the new magazine.
Yeah, Game On.
Game On.
Game On magazine.
Game On.
By the way, we should tell everybody that Game On and magazine has another episode, or I guess issue coming out in the next week. It's their wrap up of the season that was, and you can check that out online. GameOnMag.ca.
What? We just become best friends? Yep.